Welcome back to Thoughts of Ascendance of a Bookworm. Today we are looking at episode 3, The Events of Winter. The episode starts with us seeing that it is snowing in the city. It looks intense, but I would personally love to receive that much snow in the winter, not the pathetic amounts we do receive. I also want to quickly comment on mine calling this a town, when in episode 1 she referred to it as a city. It's a small thing, but it would be nice if it were consistent. Mine then tells us about what people do over the winter. Given that most people are snowed in, they do crafts around the house like sewing, weaving, basket making, and other stuff. It's a way of staying productive and making money over the winter, but I imagine it's also something for them to do and prevent them from being utterly bored when they're being trapped inside all the time. But then Effa tells Mine to stop goofing off when she was just trying to warm up by the fire, and says for her to make baskets. But Mine shuts her down and says that she already knows what she's going to make. Her pseudo-papyrus, obviously. We see that her brilliant foresight resulted in her getting the materials she would need before the winter, and so now she is able to work on it. Given what Mine tries to do, it appears that she is mimicking Thule and the wood, except with grass instead, which makes sense since papyrus is basically woven threads. But we see Mine is utterly unable to do it and has to ask Thule for help constantly, which irritates her, and I love her annoyed face. When Mine is making her papyrus, we see her give up after 3 days, and as much as I would love to say she should keep going, my probably poorly done calculations suggest it would not be worth it. By the end of day 2, she had a roughly 61% larger piece of papyrus than the day before. But by the end of day 3, it was only 32% bigger than it was on day 2. So if that downwards trajectory continued, it would have been slow progress from there. After the failed papyrus, Mine agrees to make baskets instead of playing with grass, and it turns out she's pretty good at it. So good, in fact, that she does it with her eyes closed. Thule understandably gets upset by this. It would be a tough pill for me to swallow if one of my younger siblings aced something I couldn't on their first try. I would also feel down. But Effa saves the day like usual and raises Thule's spirits by offering to teach her to sew, ready for her apprenticeship. Now we are given some more details on the baptism ceremony. We already knew from episode 1 that children have their baptism sometime after they turn 7 years old. But we now learn that this also starts their lives as apprentices. For this, you need a referral, and so it appears to be harder to not follow your parents' career path, as in most cases they would be the one to refer you. However, Mine clearly does not want to become a seamstress. I like that Effa says Mine doesn't need to learn to sew and weave for her job, but to be a refined lady. I find this detail interesting as we see that all women, regardless of class, are often able to weave and sew, and Mine's refusal to learn ends up being a hindrance to her in the future. But when the topic swaps to apprenticeships, Mine obviously says she wants to make books, but since Egypt didn't help, she'll just go even further back to ancient Mesopotamia, where clay tablets were used, and she vows to start this next project in the spring. The scene then changes, and I just want to comment on a funny little detail I've noticed about the anime. It's not always the case, but it's abundantly clear in this episode that whenever the scene changes, the anime often shows an overhead shot of the city. I just think it's a funny detail, but it is a useful sign for when the topic is about to change, or time passes. But anyway, Mine wakes up and we find out that Gunter and Thule are out picking paru fruits. And these ice trees they grow on look really beautiful, but also, ouch. Thule having to put her bare hands onto the ice must make her hands so cold and numb. Also, how did she get up there? Anyway, we now see the paru and learn that its water tastes like coconut milk, which is a bit ironic since coconuts only grow in tropical climates in our world, whilst the paru only grows in cold ones. After enjoying her drink, Mine notices how red Thule's hands are, and tells us that the branches need to be warmed up with bare hands. But do you have to just warm up the branch, or do you have to do it until the branch falls off? Just curious. We then are told about how this bizarre tree soars up high when exposed to sunlight, which I honestly just have no words for. It's just so bizarre. Now that the pyro talk is done and the scene changes, we get another skyline shot, And now mine tries paru pulp, and I think Tuli's reaction is interesting. We know it is used for bird feed, but it apparently tastes good. However, we see that Tuli and later Gunter had clearly thought it wrong to eat it, likely because we don't eat the same food as animals, we see it as beneath us. So I just want to know how long this stigma towards a good food source has existed. I also want to briefly comment on a slight translation difference between the sub and dub here, because it affects the next scene. In the sub, mine claims that the pulp is quite edible, whereas in the dub she says it's pretty tasty.
That's pretty tasty.
It's a small difference, but it makes the paru cake scene different, as in the sub it's to improve taste, whereas in the dub it almost comes across more about stylizing the food rather than improving the taste. But now Lutz and Ralph show up, asking for pulp in exchange for eggs. But poor Lutz is starving due to the winter limiting food. Lutz also has the same stigma about eating paru pulp though, as he looks disturbed when mine suggests it. But as mine shoves some in his mouth anyway, he says it tastes good. Mine Len makes paru cakes out of the paru pulp though, to improve the taste. However, she's too weak to flip it, so of course our boy Lutz helps her out. With the cakes made, they start eating. Lutz, Effa, and Tuli eat with a refined dignity, whilst Ralph scoffs two down the rudeness of it. Then Tuli asks where mine learned to make it, and she doesn't answer the question, instead saying why she made it as a thanks to Tuli for hurting her hands. Lutz, being the great guy he is, Len offers to help mine next time she wants something as thanks. It would be nice if Ralph showed that much consideration, but anyway. We also get an early version of a later saying between the two, with Lutz saying, "You're smart, but your body is weak, so let me help you out." But with that, we reach the midpoint of the episode. Returning to the episode, we see Gunter trying the paru cakes, and it is interesting to see how he coughs and looks shocked when he finds out they're made from paru. But then Tuli starts a very important conversation, mentioning how weird mine has been lately, creating inventions like the cakes and the shampoo. FLN comments on her elaborate basket from earlier in the episode, and these questions make sense. By all means, mine shouldn't be able to, or know how to, make most of the stuff she has, so it's no wonder her family thinks she's acting strange. But Gunter then interjects and says, "Who cares?" and he gives a valid reason. Mine was constantly on the brink of death, so I imagine a parent would just be happy to see their child active again and not at risk of dying. We then hear mine scream as her slate pencil has run out. The horrors. As a result, she asks Gunter to take her to the gate to see Otto. Gunter's jealousy then reaches new heights when mine says she loves Otto, probably because she hasn't said she loves her father yet, or at least we haven't heard her say it. And so he says he won't take her until the spring, under the guise of her catching a cold, to which mine complains. Skyline scene, so we're at a scene change, but it turns out Gunter had to take mine to the gate anyways, as Tuli and Effa went to pick parus. Outside, we can really see how much it has snowed in the city, with it being piled up high. Gunter is still hung up over his jealousy towards Otto, and it's funny how he views mine as saying she loves Otto as being romantic rather than platonic. In his rage, Gunter forces Otto to look after mine and threatens him not to let her catch a cold again. Mine learns some more letters and then corrects Otto's math. I like the show makes a distinction between math and reading, because being able to work with numbers and being able to read text are separate things. And then the show reminds us of how mine knows numbers. Otto then swallows his pride and asks mine for help, but we see that merchant spirit already within her as she says she won't help without compensation, and asks for letter lessons and slate pencils in return. Mine is then handed an abacus, one that looks to be more of a Russian style. In the dub, Otto calls it an abacus, but in the sub he calls it a calculator, likely because the Russian abacus doesn't have a word in Japanese, with the closest word being soroban, which refers to the Japanese abacus, which as you can see are quite different. Just an interesting detail I've noticed. But mine, being the legend she is, says she doesn't need it and that she will use her slate. Then she gives me some bad flashbacks to GCSE maths, with her method which completely amazes Otto. And somehow this is the first thing to make mine think she went too far. But then Tully and Effa show up. Skyline shot, and we know what that means by now. But now Effa shows off Tully's baptism dress to her, and mine Len vows to make Tully a hairpin to make her look even more beautiful, utilizing skills from her previous life. One issue, she doesn't have a crochet hook, so she has to go to sulking Gunter for help, and ouch, she receives one icy reception. But after mine gives him the puppy dog eyes, he agrees to try and cheers up a lot. Also, love the little sway dance. But after the hook is made, mine says she loves Gunter, and he gets so happy that he declares his victory over Otto. Mine then slowly crochets a small flower, but after witnessing it once, Effa steps in and swiftly makes the rest using her master seamstress skills. We see the finished hairpin, which we are told was an entire family project, and we get this lovely scene of the family together. I do hate the Gunter mouth movement at the end, though. I just find it disturbing. This episode's chibi scene is Ferdinand praising Gunter, whilst Mine says he's too clingy. Ferdinand then goes on to say Mine hasn't made any of the paper she said she would yet, before reminding us that she will make clay tablets next. But Ferdinand correctly reminds us that clay is hardly paper, which is very true. It would be rather difficult to make a book out of thick clay tablets. But with that, the episode ends. I hope you enjoyed, and please let me know your thoughts down below. Bye!